And we're live with a Rebel Health Spotlight, and this is going to be fun because I'm at the end of a day and I'm tired. She's at the beginning of the day, tired, and we're going to be loopy and silly and fun together. So this is my friend Brie, who we've had on a lot of times before with various things. Um, I think we did podcasts, we've done another interview, we've done a webinar or something along the lines somewhere at some point. We did a webinar during COVID. I did a series about
Oh
COVID.
yeah. I told
And
my
we
life
did a
story.
webinar. I
Yeah.
did tons of webinars during COVID, and you were one of those. I don't remember what we talked about, but I think it was maybe about like not going crazy during a pandemic,
I think it was like that.
which we were probably crazy while we were doing it. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I want you to just briefly let everybody know who you are and what you do, and then we're going to dive into some interesting conversation around your work and the model that you're now working in, and who knows where that's going to go from there.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Brie Wieselman. I've from like who I am in medicine, basically like that part of my journey is that I've been in some form of health practice since like 2001, first informally as a like Western and Ayurvedic herbalist, which was my first point of education that came from like playing with plant medicines that were psychotropic as a kid and that going leading me to go like, hey, wow, we have receptor sites for these things in our body, what do the other plants do? And so that began a long journey. So it was first like plant medicines, and then that took me to Chinese medicine school to further my education in the plants, but also learned needles and Chinese therapeutics and that whole system of medicine, which along the lines, I ran into teachers who were integrating Western and Eastern medicine, and they were my main mentors who I apprenticed. At the time, it wasn't called functional medicine. We just followed Jeff Bland around every time Metagenics came to town, and then Datis Karazian, and then eventually somebody, called it functional medicine, and there we were. But it was around that time that I started kind of jumping on that bandwagon and perceiving that system as really just Chinese medicine and English word clothing. And so yeah, so I've always dabbled
Right.
in models of
Letting
holism,
the
and then here I am 20 something years later in practice. And practice before has looked like brick and mortar work in live patient care one-on-one, a lot of work in fertility and hep C along the way, and gut health when I transitioned online in 2012. um, and have seen thousands of patients in the online space since then, um, and kind of still doing that, but just in newer and different shapes.
Yeah, so you've done a lot of I mean, you've had a lot of transitions in the last year or two. You moved, your life kind of changed quite a bit. And in your professional practice, you mentioned you've seen thousands of patients, worked predominantly in fertility, gut health. Did you say Hep C?
Yeah, so I did a lot of work in harm reduction centers for people who were trying to live more healthfully while using substances
Okay.
or coming off of them initially when I was an herbalist. And so I got really interested in the population of people with HIV and Hep C, and at the time it wasn't curable. So there was a recognition that Chinese medicine was instrumental to the success outcomes of people like undergoing interferon or Peginchon at the time.
Okay.
And so I worked with that population exclusively for the first 3 years of practice, but it
Wow.
was hard. It was a
That's an
hard,
intense environment.
well, back then people were dying from it. So
Yeah.
not always, but
No, but that's intense.
yeah,
That's an intense environment. Like that's an intense setting.
people pay per
When
dues
people are
early.
really sick and people are dying, and yeah, so you jumped right into the deep end of the pool. Then
Yeah,
I wasn't sure you said Hep C. That's one that nobody's ever said on any interview or podcast I've ever done, and I was like, did she
yeah,
just say
yeah,
hepatitis? That's not a
yeah.
normal niche amongst
What
practitioners.
happened?
So
Yeah, that's another story for another day. But yeah,
okay, so now though, and I guess this it does correlate to fertility and gut health, but your
absolutely.
forward-facing focus or niche or topic or patient avatar
Yeah,
is I'm going to use marketing words is perimenopause,
it is.
which you can
Perimenopause.
tie in like fertility, hormones, gut health, all those things. You're just taking what kind of is like a bing 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 and putting it here, because there's a lot of women that need help in that department. So what
Yeah.
was it a frustration with the lack of options that exist, or a really passionate desire to work with that topic? Like
Yeah.
Where'd the little light bulb go off in your head? Like, you know what? I'm going to shift and I'm going to work with perimenopausal women.
Mhm. Well, there's a couple things, some of them professional needs and some of them personal, and I'll just like mention all those. So one of them is I'm 45 and I get stopped all the
Are
time.
you?
Yeah, and people ask me, "What are you doing?" Because when they meet
Ah,
me and I tell them, like eventually, not like, "Hi, I'm Brie, I'm 45," but like, eventually they're like, "I really thought you were maybe like 33." And they're like, kind of like, "Okay, so what are you doing?" So there's that. Okay, the other personal thing is not the like, oh, let me like, brag about that because that's obnoxious. But the other thing is that I did IVF. I'm a woman living with PCOS. I had IVF and gave birth at 40 while running a company with a lot of employees and people helping me make the business happen and a lot of clients to manage. And when my kid was 3, went through a divorce and moved states away from my very rich and deep community of 24 years in the Bay Area. And so there was just a profound amount of change, and I needed a change in terms of how I was going to make all the pieces work. And so, simultaneously to like the context of post-pandemic world, I saw a need for healthcare, the way I was delivering healthcare to change in terms of how is this going to be fulfilling to me, so that I have the like excitement to keep going. How am I going to keep this alive, and how does my genius want to come through? And also, how am I going to best serve people? And so also, I'm perimenopausal, and perimenopause, people like don't really get it. They're like, well, you're not hot flashing yet and like having vaginal dryness. I'm like, whoa, girl, like this starts 15 years prior. Let's just have that conversation. So there's all these changes, like long before people are having like hot flashes and all that. They're having poor stress resilience, and they're having anxiety, and their sleep is starting to go, and their weight is starting to crawl up, and they're like, something's not quite wrong, but something's not quite right. And like my main driver is like, and candidly, this is all humans, but for me, I'm just going to pick this doorway. It's like when women are happy and fulfilled and are living a life where they're oriented towards pleasure. And I mean pleasure in both a healthy, selfish way, but also pleasure like I'm expressing and actualizing who I am. I am actively seeking joy in my life, and I'm choosing who I'm surrounded by and what experience I want to have, then and my life has meaning, then everything they touch turns to gold, right? And so like, how do I best create a better world, or the world I want to see, by helping those people like do that, right? So that's kind of my secret mission. um my not so secret mission looks like, yes, let's balance your hormones and get you like not gaining weight and like having the energy you want. But like that's kind of like the details of what drives people to seek a solution. But my secret mission is like, get these women joyful and activated so that they go out in the world and like do whatever they're here to do and enjoy it. So the
very
group thing,
I love the secret mission, forward facing mission. And I know like it's the thing, it's like the bait.
yeah,
Like, let's
exactly.
give people what they need, not what they want. And what they want might be I need my hormones fixed. I need to not have hot flashes. I need to not lose my hair. I'm not a perimenopausal pro, so I don't even know what all the symptoms
Yeah,
are.
but yeah,
I just ran out of my list, but they'll come because they don't want that.
yeah.
They don't realize that in order to not have that, they're also going to gain
Hmm.
a lot of life back. That maybe is the absence of that is the reason they have those things they don't want in the first place.
Exactly. And those symptoms are just a compass pointing us towards where
Mhm.
we should go. Our body's always just giving us messages. It can't text us and say, hey, here's what I need. I mean, maybe with AI we'll go that way, but like,
Gen
um,
Zer right there just said there was a time where people that can't text.
right? So anyway, it's like, our body's telling us what we need to do, but the same things, to your point, the same things we do to make a body hospitable to a baby, the same things we do to enhance
Mhm.
fertility are kind of the same things we do to enhance how we feel in this perimenopause window, which are actually the same things we do in the decades to follow. To my other secret mission is like enhance longevity. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean like we get to take over how many numbers of years we're here necessarily, but we can influence how well we feel and how our play span and well span and creator span and all of the connectivity we have. So that's all the same work, and it is founded in these underlying physiology body systems, because when those are relatively functioning, we carve out bandwidth for doing the healing work of trauma, or changing the thing that's not working in our life, or
Mhm.
going in a direction that we do want.
Yeah,
because
but
we're
if your foundation is a mess and your physiology is a mess, it's really, really difficult to find the capacity to do that. Then you have like a chicken egg situation of how do I get out of this
yeah, how do we do
how do
it?
I get out of this mess? So it's setting like a more solid foundation. I guess it's
Mhm.
like pushing
Fill
off
in the
solid ground
cracks.
versus pushing off sand.
Yeah, like
Um,
fill the cracks of the vessel so the chi can flow through,
yeah, yeah.
more in a direction that's net positive.
Back to Chinese medicine.
It
Uh,
always comes back to that for me.
yeah, yeah. I think we've talked about this. I was super close to going to there's a school in I think it's in Los Angeles for
Yeah.
Chinese
Oh, yeah,
medicine. Like
Picom
is it
or,
U No, it had a Chinese name to it, but I almost went there because I had a mind-blowing experience with a doctor in Chicago who was a MD and a Chinese medicine doctor. And I sat with her for 90 minutes once, and she pulled out the thing that has the elements on it and had looked at my medical history and my tests and my symptoms, and then proceeded to spend a half hour telling me about myself.
yeah.
And at the end of it, I was like, what the hell just happened? And then because she was using like, well, your wood and your liver means this,
Yeah,
and you
the
have an issue
fire and
with
the metal.
anger, but that's why you drink, and the drinking hurts this thing, and this happens. And then I was like, holy shit. And it wasn't like this moment where I'm like, oh, I need to do all these things for myself. It was, I need to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
jumped
so
straight to like, I want to know that. I want to learn how to do that. So then I was going to go, but then there's needles and I'm terrified of needles and I never got over it. So my needle phobia is the reason I never became a Chinese medicine person.
that's funny, and now here you are doing, like, breath work and qigong, and I mean, it finds you
Yeah,
anyway.
and I have a lot
There
of
was just something
tattoos.
there for
But
you, not
but
needles.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There was something there for me and I got the thing I needed and I didn't need the whole pie. But so
Yeah.
the perimenopause symptoms and the desire to feel better is the doorway to get them
Yeah.
to come to do the things that fix that happen to also change the way that they're going to live and
Yeah.
enjoy and experience the rest of your life. I like that you mentioned I always hear health span, but you had a few other ones that you shared there, like
Creator
um,
span and play
creator span,
span.
because moving to Italy, one of the first things we noticed when we got here was the amount of people who are very elderly who are out and about. And the town that we lived in first, now that Lucca, I live in Lucca and it's flat, relatively flat. But when we got here and we lived in Montepulciano, it's like a 45-degree angle, all the streets there. Like everything is like this. And
I walked
there
to
were,
school both ways uphill for
yes, and
really
there
is
were
real there.
very elderly people. I'm talking like in their 90s or above who you'd see walking to the grocery store, walking up the hill, going to these places, out and about at restaurants. We see them getting gelato. That's another thing we've noticed is very elderly people are always at the gelato shops eating gelato. And that you don't see any of that in most of the places in the US, like 90 plus year olds out and about on their own, independent, living alone, doing things that they enjoy. A lot of people, if we make it to that age in the States, you're in a home, you're sick,
Yeah.
you're on 17 medications. So I like that you pointed out with longevity that it's not the number of years. The number of years is great, but it's like, what can you do in
Mhm.
those years? So
There's something else I wanna mention that you just pointed out. So, like you just said,
sure.
"Well, I moved to Europe. I moved to Italy."
Hmm.
And we see people out in the streets doing
Hmm.
whatever, biking, walking to the place, and so there's part of it that's
Yeah.
just like we can reduce that to, like, movement, but here's the other thing, like, I was just spent about 2 weeks in Spain, and I saw some family of
Mhm.
mine in Malaga. I was in Barcelona, I went to Lisboa and, like, did a dance conference. One of the things that, like, having not been there in a while struck me was, every city and town, there's like a promenade, right? It's like La
Mhm.
Rambla or it's like wherever,
Yeah.
there's different places you can name,
Mhm.
and multiple of them in cities. But
Mhm.
people are out and you see, the
Yeah.
90-year-old and the 2-year-old and together.
Yeah.
And so I think that is also something our the structure of, like, I've
Mhm.
largely grown up in the US as a first generation person, but one of the things that is not you don't see as much are these, like, I guess we have outdoor malls or something, but it's kind of different. It's just not that same vibe of, like, this has been here forever and this is part of how we do. And there's a thing about the togetherness, and we were kind of, like, dancing on this, and I kinda wanted to, like, so that was another big shift for my
Mhm.
practice, and some of it is this calling back to something I knew to be true, like, how, like, when we're, like, 18 and 19 and we just think we are all that and we know what's up and we are gonna run the world.
Yeah.
Well, there's like some value, even though we're a little bit like, it's kind of like the pure confidence you have to have that's a little crazy as a business owner because you're like, oh, I'm going to make this crazy thing happen and I have to believe in it wholesale or else it's not going to work. It's kind of like that. Like there's some things we do actually know at that age that maybe are going to take a while to actualize. But one of the things for me was this idea of togetherness in groups and well-being that came full center for me. And some of that happened through insights I had really like in some of my early psychedelic journeys. So like I was at this concert, I was at a fish show. I was at a fish show when I was 16, on a lot of something. And
Yeah.
it was like I decided to kind of like depart from the people I had been kind of cohorting and hanging with, not because I didn't like them, but just I wanted to like go have my own experience. So I like wandered off and like I would do this. I would like make new friends and like get
Yeah.
here we go. So there's this, I had accumulated a bubble of people and we like went over
We're
to
both
like,
wander off and make new friends, people. That's how we even know each
yeah,
other
that's how
now.
we met.
Yeah.
So we go to this drum circle and I'm hanging out with these new friends and we just start dancing and the conversation just got so much richer. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
and this was before I knew I was like that dancer is one of my like key personas in life that like, heals me. So I was like, oh, this has to do with drums and rhythm. And like, we're all connecting to this. And it was like, okay, so neural connections were made. So then I, moved to the West Coast and I started looking into at the time dance, this idea of dance therapy and like predecessors to Martha Graham and like Naropa Institute had a program. And like I had thought about this because what it was being used for in practice in modern day was largely like people who were either like non-verbal or severe schizophrenic. And this idea that when we could just even get people to like be around a pulse and clap on a pulse or tap on something, that in and of itself was resonant and healing because they suddenly remembered how to feel that they weren't in isolation, they were part of something. If you look back tribally, this was something we did every group had some form
Mhm.
of this, like we are going to have
Yeah.
drums or whatever, and that is the heartbeat, and that is,
And they would return to that circle when there was a loss, when there was somebody suffering, when somebody was sick, when somebody needed
a
support.
marriage, a harvest of
Yeah, celebrations,
will
like
you.
it. Yeah.
And also at the same time, I got interested in like how psychedelics were healing medicine, which was way before its time. Like now that's actually a thing, and hallelujah. But like I was very interested in of ayahuasca and its traditions because it was a medicine that was traditionally used as a healing agent and with intention in that way. And part of the way that at least like not the Santo Daime, but some of the like tribal predecessors to that group used it. The idea was when someone, like there wasn't a lot of social deviance, there wasn't like theft and violent crime and things in these societies as much, because when they saw that someone was like off track in some way, they would have this like ceremony and give them medicine and sit with them. So we put
Mhm.
people in prisons and say, go away, you're bad, right? And
Yeah.
like, that's a whole nother, but they understood innately this person got disconnected and they need to be reconnected. How do we reconnect them? Because when they feel like they are part of me and I am part of them, they're not going to act in ways that are,
And it didn't use shame.
yes, no shame, not
It's
harmful.
our
So
prison system uses shame, and so does our parenting style in the US. How many people listening right now, like myself, were go to your room kids?
your room, go away, be by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And think about what you did,
think about
right?
what, because
Yeah.
that
And
always helps.
so, yeah, because you're 5 and you have an ability to figure out what you
Do
just did.
that.
But
Yeah. So groups.
that
So
so inviting them into the group and being like, if they're acting in this way, it's because they feel that they aren't part of the group or that they've become disconnected from the group. So now you have taken this fish show, drum circle, ayahuasca traditional idea,
yeah,
and you've shifted your practice from predominantly working with individuals to predominantly working with groups. Yeah.
groups, small cohorts. And I mean, on a very practical level, I also realized that working with someone once every 4 to 8 weeks for even an hour, I can't deliver the education that gives them the true empowerment in that format effectively. So in this way, I'm able to meet with people. They have access to me twice a week in person and all, every week in a group like messaging board type thing, but also I could give them whole pieces of education that build upon, so that I can teach them a system. Because what I really want is for people to call me when they're like 80 and be like, remember that stuff I did with you when I was like, 40? That changed my life. Thanks. Like those are systems I use, right? And I can't deliver that as effectively, with one-on-one people, but like the repetition you get in groups and the empowerment of seeing things role modeled and seeing people who are a few steps ahead of you, or telling people who are like where you were just a little bit ago, like, hey, keep going. All of that matters. And we heal better in groups most of the time. There are certain situations in medicine where absolutely you need like one-on-one care. But for this stuff that's about the general direction we're going in and the places we have choice, and that really are epigenetic lifestyle medicine in its core, that stuff happens when we're together better,
Yeah. Yeah,
faster,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
No, I dig it. We talked before we went on air that I'm, creating a whole new practice slash career slash offering slash whatever I'm going to do with all the training I've been buried in for 5 years. It's weird to step out of constant student mode into facilitator. It's nice. Like it's refreshing. I am in a training. I'm with Francis Weller right now. I think you know
Oh,
who he
cool.
is.
Yeah.
He trains on
Yeah.
grief. I'm in a 5-month training with him on grief and grief rituals. And I bring that up because he teaches a ton about the history of like human villages and groups and how they've related to grief specifically, but also bringing it's always the circle, it's always the village, it's always the ritual, it's always the community, it's always held together the most difficult
Mhm.
things. It's never in isolation. We were never intended to deal with these things in isolation. We don't have the capacity to do it. So if you can't deal on your own, all alone, isolated, it's not you, it's the system that we're in that's unhealthy. But side rant over. Um, I'm also going to be working in small cohorts and groups because I think that there's a really unique experience to it that is um, part of who we are. Like it's part of how like we're wired for connection and for having things mirrored to us, to being like accepted, to being
Being
part of
witness.
something. And I just got off an interview actually for an online summit that I'm co-hosting for Health Means that with Nathan Crane. I don't know if you know who he is, but I just interviewed him. He does integrative cancer. He's made a bunch of movies. He's done a
Oh,
lot of
yes.
documentaries, tons of energy. One of the most high energy people I've ever interviewed. It's the only thing that kept me awake for coming on this one. I have a 3-month-old. This is not to say that I'm bored. I didn't sleep last night for people who don't know. He talked about um, the biochemistry that happens when we see somebody helping somebody else. So we get
Mm.
positive biochemistry responses when we help somebody else, but we also get positive biochemistry responses from seeing somebody help somebody else. Like
Wow.
if you see somebody help an old lady across the street,
Oh, yeah.
your own body produces positive biochemistry. And in groups, the ability to create that, like say you're in a group and you're talking to one of the people in the group specifically and you're helping her with a specific problem, and then she's like super grateful for this help and she has an aha moment and she's going to make this really positive change. Everyone else who's sitting in that group with you
Mhm.
has a positive biochemical response to that. And
Mhm.
if that is true, that means that we are designed to do that. Why else would there be a reward system built into our physiology
Right.
if we're not supposed to be in groups helping each other? And he brought that up, like the idea that the survival of the fittest when it comes to evolution and all these things with humans is not the way.
Oh,
Because
no.
if it was, we wouldn't get biochemically rewarded. Like our bodies wouldn't give us, treats
Yeah.
for doing something that helps somebody else. You would push the old person in front of a bus if it was
Yeah.
truly survival of the fittest. And then you would feel awesome about it. And you'd be like, one less person to take my food. I'm the champion. But it's the opposite of that. I hope nobody clips that little cut
I know,
out of
right? Like,
there and
whoops.
uses that. That's how the internet works.
You should
But
lean into the podcast with that. When you shove her in front of the
yeah,
bus.
when you shove the elderly person in front of a bus. But
5 points.
so that was a lot of unasked for, unsolicited high five to
No,
your
tend
shift to
and
groups,
befriend. Tend
basically.
and befriend. Tend and befriend is a response, a stress response in studies. If you want to, if anyone's curious and wants to, PubMed, Google Scholar that, what you're talking about is called the tend and befriend response, and it is observed in all species. It's not the only response to stress is not fight or flight.
That's just the one that we like to talk about because we love to be terrified all the time, and people who tell us what to think about love us to be terrified all the time. So, um, very cool. Switching to
Cool.
groups, perimenopause is the way in the door to the secret thing of helping women actually live better and feel better and enjoy their life more. And I'm curious where can people find you and how can they explore like if there's a lot of Joe and I don't know, did you ever interview with Joe when I was partnered with Joe on here?
I
Did you
didn't.
ever
I
meet
mean, I
Joe or
know you
talk
guys
to
work
Joe or
together.
anything?
No,
Okay.
never. Yeah.
Well, Joe and I started RHT 10 years ago. Soon is 10 years, which is like 1,000 in this world. So 10 years ago it's been since we started this, and after the first couple years we decided to send out a survey that try to gauge like who our audience was so we could determine what kind of content to produce next. Like, what did they want stuff on? And it was like, and this was almost 10 years ago, it was like 70% women. Well, it was like 85% women, but it was like 70% women that probably fall into the category of your target patients right now.
Yeah.
And like 45 to 60 and or 40 to 60 women who either had a chronic health issue or somebody in their life did, so they were the one that was online trying to figure out how to help the person, because that's always the woman doing that. The men will go do that if they're like literally dying or if there's not another person to help them, and nobody's going to do it for them. Sorry guys. But it was like perimenopausal women were our like
Yeah.
super target, like, and we were one, shocked, and two, we're like, what the hell
There's reasons for that.
do we teach
Mhm.
them? And then Joe's like, well, the same stuff we teach anyway is good for them. So we'll just keep teaching the same stuff. And it worked. But so our audience here at RHT is largely within your demographics. So, like, if they hear you talking and they hear about this and they want to go check it out, tell them where to go and what to do.
Yeah, so you can always reach me through my website, which is just my name.com, brieweiselman.com. It's probably in the show notes. It's hard to spell, but it's there. I'm on Insta regularly and Facebook page. The link to more information about what the heck this program is about is stayyoungmethod.com and then /register, or just stayyoungmethod.com. It'll get you the same place. But there's a webinar there that can lead to kind of more information about like what's actually involved in that. So those are great places to interface with me, but I love chatting with people. So DM me, message on my posts, I'll chat with you, you know, all that. It's fun
Yeah,
to
Bree's
talk to
super
people.
accessible. So, um, okay, cool. We'll put all
Yeah,
those links right below the video. I just wanted, if somebody's listening and they're not on the website or our website right now to click something, I wanted them to be able to hear it also. So, we'll
yeah,
put the links there so they can go there, watch that, check it out, reach out, ask questions. And finally, always put guests on the spot on this series to share a couple of your favorite either self-care practices or like needle movers or things somebody might learn when they walk in the door
absolutely.
to one of your groups. Just your favorites that might apply to just about any, if it's middle-aged woman at this point.
Totally. So, it's funny. I spent, let's say, like $300,000 on a medical degree to basically learn to tell people the same things I tell my 4-year-old, which is like, are you drinking enough water? Eat your veggies and eat protein. Go outside and run around. Go the fuck to sleep. Are we having fun? And let's talk about your emotions. Like, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of not, because I sat down with this the other day and like wrote out my pillars, and I was like, oh my God, like, wow, $300,000 and 25 years of practice later. But no, so I would say that the biggest needle movers, like if I'm like, about things, the rest of it, yes, we have fancy labs and blah, 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 and all that, but put on as much muscle as you can in this decade. If you haven't been doing it, it doesn't matter. Go start tomorrow. Just start lifting things that are heavy and keep lifting them heavier.
Can you
And
just speak to I used to be a trainer and I know that this comes up and I want them to hear it from you, not from me, because I'm the
yeah,
man. Can you calm the panic that happens inside of some women's mind when they hear that they should lift weights or get stronger, that they're going to end up having shoulders like mine within the first 2 weeks of when they go into the gym?
okay, so they're not, like, you can see I'm like a pretty petite person. I
Hmm.
currently weigh, I'm just gonna out this. Okay, I currently weigh roughly 125, give or take a few pounds on any given day. But I weighed, 140 after IVF and pregnancy, and I'm 5'3". I'm pretty small. So I couldn't, as a perimenopausal woman, I could not get that weight that was hanging on from the hormones I had taken from the IVF and the pregnancy and the pandemic until I started lifting heavy things. And what happens is that when you do it appropriately, paired with, and I'm going to say my second tip in a second, then what happens is your body switches composition. So get away from numbers on the scale. I weighed 120 in high school. Yeah, I had no muscle mass, but it's about having more lean mass and the fat mass shrinks. So what happens is what you see change in is how you fit in your jeans or your clothes, right? And so you're not gonna, it takes a very intentional, it takes certain hormones and it takes a very certain diet to put on bulk like that. So it's not going to happen. And if it is, there's ways to like, just tweak a few things so that that's
But
not
you're
the
not
best.
lifting for 2 hours a day and taking a thousand
No, a
steps and doing
thousand
all
reps.
kinds of stuff like that. And yeah, that's not going
It
to
is
happen.
really hard to bulk up, actually. So,
Yeah.
yes, not going to happen. We're talking about a realistic amount of like 2 to 4 times a week for, half hour to an hour or whatever it is that it fits in your world. And maybe you start small. And if you're starting off the couch, please do not like go crazy thinking you have to jump from, 0 to 100.
90-minute CrossFit workout.
No, please. Oh my God, no. But I will say that like, when I'm doing leg presses, like I'm doing like, 260 and like I'm a little person. And so like my legs are not, tree trunks. So don't freak out about it. There's ways to do it. Get some help, have someone help you structure and
So
tell you what to
lift
do.
heavy things, put on
There's
muscle is
things that's
one.
going
What
to
were you going
keep
to
your
say to combine that
mitochondria.
with?
So the other paired thing is eat more protein than you think you need, because as we get older, we need a boatload more protein, and keeping our insulin low and stable and staying sensitive to it, meaning not going in the insulin resistant direction, with which as women in perimenopausal hormonal transitions, everything is trying to push us in the direction of insulin resistance. There's evolutionary reasons that that was so, but they don't work in our favor in today's world. And so we need more protein because that's how we keep and maintain muscle, which is the secret to like a long, healthy life, is like how much muscle can you keep and put on, because that's how many mitochondria you have and how well they function. And guess where your insulin receptors are? They're on your muscle. And so you stay more insulin sensitive, and all the rest of the inflammaging and oxidative stress that happens goes down. So you can choose. It's totally in your power to choose. I tell my daughter that, my God, everything goes back to what I tell my 4-year-old. You have the power to choose. You can either go in a direction of catabolism, your body eating itself and oxidizing and inflammaging, and your immune system dysregulating and making less net energy in your cells, or you can maintain, or even it is a total myth that we are just going downhill from here. You can totally improve things. You can reverse your cellular age. You can increase your energy and feel better than you have in the past. And now is this like golden window where you can do that really at any age,
Awesome. More
Yeah.
protein, heavy things, drink water, eat
Oh,
veggies.
and find
Awesome.
things that surround yourself with people who
Fun.
find your joy. Like
Yeah.
you got to do
Eh,
that. We're not doing something
Otherwise,
for fun.
what's the point?
Yeah.
Why want to be around longer if you're not doing anything fun? So I find it very fascinating that I don't know how many of these I recorded, but a bunch. And the uh the thing at the end, when I first got into doing this work like 10 years ago, was when like Dan was huge, Kalish,
Yeah.
and he was on Sean's things,
Mhm.
Croxton.
Yep.
And then there'd be like Andrea was on all of those too,
Mhm.
Nakayama, and
Nakayama.
who I did an episode of this with. She's really cool. I never met her for a long time. And we've just met last year and we've done a couple recordings. And but the trend and bland and the trend was like complexity. Like what lab tests do you know how to run? Do you know how to interpret this? Like the adrenal profiles, the salivary adrenal profiles, the um
Methylation. Like,
then out came the organic acids test, and holy shit, is that complex. And then the Dutch test, because we
it's my
needed to
favorite
also
test
make
though.
it, they're great. You can learn
You're,
tons of
oh my
stuff.
God.
You
Organic
can learn
acids.
tons of stuff, but it's like a college education to learn how to properly interpret it. And then people want to order these on their own. So then they order them, and then the sheet tells them, like, oh, your this is out of whack. You have. So I would get clients. I haven't worked with health clients one on one in 5 years. And when I stopped, I would get clients who would come to me and say, I have these like symptoms. I've seen these 5 doctors. I want to run these 4 lab tests. I want to go on a protocol for this. I want this supplements. I want to do this. And it was like the complexity was the thing. The more complex you could make it sound what you did, the more people would want to come see you, or the more complexity you could handle. And now I find it really ironic. And I'd heard this all the way back then too, from Paul Chek, who I studied with at the Chek Institute, who started in fitness but got into holistic health. He his I think he calls them the 5 doctors. I might 4 doctors, I don't know, but it's been a long time. They were sleep, movement,
Mm-hmm.
stress,
Mm-hmm.
quiet, and diet.
Mm-hmm.
And the things were so simple. But then I was like, no, I got to do all these complex things or else I'm not going to be able to help people. And now on this series, this is the first time I've noticed this trend really kicking in, is I'm asking everyone to share practices, right? Probably 90% of the practices that have been shared are like a really simple way to change how you breathe, or go outside and touch the ground,
Yeah.
or get sunlight in your eyes in the morning, or eat protein, or lift heavy things, or and it's almost gone this like full circle back to like things that you would tell a 4-year-old, because if those things aren't in order, all of that complex shit isn't going to matter.
Yeah.
Like, like if somebody wants to run $10,000 in labs, fine, great. What time do you go to bed? And what's your stress level like? And what are you eating? Like, let's check that out before you drop the bank and
Yeah.
find out a whole bunch, like,
Five
but I
thousand
love
dollars
love it.
supplements
At some
later.
point, I'm gonna make a list of all the recommendations that are coming at the end of these interviews, and it's going to feel silly when somebody reads it, because it is going to be like the most basic, simple, easy things. But I think that it'll kind of be like a slap in the face that, like, wow, it doesn't have to be this, like, it's not that hard.
No,
So,
it's not that expensive.
no, and there's a place for that. Like there's a use for the labs, there's a use for the supplements, there's a use for those things for sure. I'm not trying to throw all that stuff under the bus, but I'm excited to see very, very smart people who know tons of complex stuff come on here and say, like, go outside, do fun things. Because nobody was telling anybody to do that for a long time. It was like, eat this super hyper restrictive diet and take these 19 supplements and run these 14 lab tests and do this thing, and then maybe you'll be healthy, but don't worry about moving or water or smiling or seeing your family. Like,
Yeah. We were,
so sorry about that
we-
extra rant.
no, it's great. We were spending a decade and a half, 2 decades trying to justify this approach to the Western medical world, and it had to look fancy and
I
lab-based.
think
And
so.
it
I
still
think it
is, but
was.
now we're like, but also if people aren't doing this stuff and balancing their blood sugar and blah, 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 and touching the earth, then like none of the rest of
Do-
this fancy ass
doesn't
stuff
matter.
works. Excuse my French.
It's just very expensive. No, I think the boat went away on the language a while ago on this interview, so it's okay. And no, we don't edit it, so it'll be in there. Sorry if we offended anybody. But
I'm not, that's what you
th-
get. So if you don't
me
like
too.
it, I'm
And
not for you.
honestly, if they're watching this, they probably are desensitized to it because it's not the first time in one of my interviews either, and that's who I am too. So, um, thank you for doing this, and for I'm not sleepy anymore. So that was
Oh, thank
fun,
you.
and I hope this was a fun way to start your day. And the links are down below, so go check out Brie and her work and her groups. If you are in that demographic, I think that there's no better place that you could go to find community and find information and education and find support and really change like what you perceive as normal that you're going to have to go through, and make it something else that isn't that, because it doesn't have to be that, I don't think.
No, thank you. And thanks for having me.
Cool.
It's been a blast. I feel my energy is way, way better.
Awesome.